I am so honored to be here and make history with you all. This is really, really exciting. I love to advocate for children. And what I found when I first started into my field is that we did a lot more advocating for school systems than we did for children. And that was not okay with me. In fact, is why I left the school district and started my own company so I could focus on kids and advocate for them in the school setting, because there are so many things that are available within the school setting, and it's like the world's best kept secret. I'm about to reveal them to you today. So when we talk about taking a rare disease to school, we realize that that can come with a multitude of different issues because every rare disease is different. I have lupus. I also have epilepsy. I deal with chronic pain. I deal with a lot of the same things that you all are. We have very similar, oh dear, I have to learn how to use something new. Forward and backwards. Easy enough, forward, backwards, I can do that. So we know that within the school there's a lot of different challenges that your child might actually run into. So first of all, understand that children with chronic illnesses are more likely to report several things that can have an adverse impact on their education, and that includes things like missing school because they don't feel well, missing school because of doctor's appointments, and even when they're in school, oftentimes having a difficult time paying attention and maintaining their concentration, being able to stay on task. And they often say they find it hard to keep up with their peers in terms of not only physical activity, but cognitive activity as well. And so with those challenges being put into place, there are several things to consider in terms of what can you do to advocate for your child. And I know that, sometimes some kids, it requires an extended period of time for them to be outside of school, and that can really set them back, obviously, educationally. And so realize, though, that there are ways to transition a child back into the school setting and make sure that they have appropriate supports in place so that they can close that gap that has been created by their absences. And so with that being said, children have to be proactive themselves. I'm in the schools all the time, and I see even kindergartners, first graders, second graders going to their teacher and saying, what did I miss yesterday, and getting their homework. And so it's really important, obviously, for our kiddos to be getting their homework and being able to stay up on that even while they're out of school. I've got my old glasses on here with me today if you're wondering why I'm taking them on and off. They don't work quite as well as they should. My other ones went through the washing machine. It was really hard on them and didn't work out very well. Okay, so, and parents, you need to stress the importance to your children of them doing their homework and making it kind of a routine in your home where that's just a normal part of what you do, even if they're having to be at home for a period of time. Also, for parents, you should definitely get a hold of your child's teacher right away. I suggest this at the beginning of every school year, that you should be meeting with your child's teacher for that school year and discussing with them what your child's challenges are. See, what happens is, after a period of time, teachers begin to wonder if children are using things as an excuse, okay? And we don't want our children to be put in a position where they're being kind of accused of, just doing things halfway or whatever as an excuse because they have a rare disorder, when in fact, there are many reasons why they might be behind that's directly related to the rare disorder. So I think informing the teacher from the very beginning of the year, and certainly, HPP is a rare disorder. I would be shocked if there would be a single teacher that would already know what that is, all right? So you are the educator for the school. That's the only place they're going to get this information is if you tell them, Okay, so getting the school information about HPP and how it does impact your child can go a long ways. And then be sure to remember, because I know there's going to be absences, get a note from the doctor. Be sure to get a note and take it back to your school. First of all, most state laws require that now. They're getting really, really picky about attendance these days. So, it may be required in your school anyway. But if it's not, you should do that just because it helps the school understand that your child has a medical condition that is impacting him or her. So when we take a chronic illness to school, there are several things to consider in terms of how to get help for your child. There are what we call accommodations, and that's a good place to start. Accommodations are things that assist your child in the classroom to kind of stay up with everybody else, and it might be something that none of the rest of the students get. So, for example, there's the thing out there called smart pens, and they're like little computer recorders, and you write on this paper and take notes, and you can go back and tap on your notes at any place, and that smart pen will go right back to where you were when the teacher said that, and you can hear it again. And so sometimes children who have missed a lot of school and maybe have some gaps, they need to hear these things over and over and over again, right, for the reinforcement. And the other reason why they really help is because they literally let you slow down the lecture. And so for many kids with a rare disease, their processing speed is a little slower. And so, if I'm talking 90 miles an hour and you're processing at 70 miles per hour, eventually we're going to overlap. You're going to start losing information. And so having that tool as an assistance, for them to be able to go back and re-listen to things can be really helpful for them. I'm sorry, I see that white background is not very helpful. I'll make a note of that and change that on future slides. Let's see. If you have concerns, you should definitely bring them up sooner rather than later, because you're stressed out. You've got a lot going on. You've got a lot that you have to organize and keep on track. And if things are falling apart at school and you just let that go and go and go, you're going to explode. That's just the end of things there, So kind of try to stay up with that. And if you do have concerns about things that are happening at school with your child, then you should definitely bring that up with the teachers and try to get that resolved as soon as possible. And then be sure to let them know what your child's needs are, of course. Now, within the school setting, there are many, many supports, and you may or may not be aware of some of them. But many students with chronic illnesses qualify and benefit from either a 504 plan or an IEP. And so I'm going to talk about both of those because you won't get both. It's either or, okay? You're either getting a 504 or you're getting an IEP. And then the school would say, or you're getting nothing, but I won't talk about that part because you are getting something. So there's two laws that are involved here that kind of govern the schools in terms of your children's rights. And the first one, the Section 504, is part of the Rehabilitative Act, and it's civil rights. Now, I'll tell you, the schools don't like to think that the civil rights are going to come down on them. And so they do take their 504s pretty seriously. And so a 504 is just a plan that's written for your child. And it's typically only accommodations, things that kind of level the playing field for your child, like maybe a smart pen, or if they're in a wheelchair, maybe they need, a water bottle, or maybe because of medications, they need access to a water bottle. And so those are the kinds of things that might be put on a 504 plan to support your child. What the 504, and it's legally binding, and again, under civil rights. And so they do take them seriously, but what a 504 plan will not do for you is provide an intervention specialist. And an intervention specialist is that extra teacher that knows different ways of teaching things that can help a child progress more quickly in the curriculum if they get behind. And so the big consideration here would be, is your child behind academically? That's not the only thing we care about in the school, although that's mostly what the school will focus on, is just your academics. But frankly, the law is much more expansive than that under IDEA, so we'll talk about that as well. So a 504 plan sometimes will also be a health plan. Just so you realize, there are two different things in the school. Some schools call it a health plan, and some people just put the health plan on a 504 plan. Either way, it's fine, but just realize that a health plan is not legally binding and you have no civil rights associated with that. And so for the safety of your child in terms of getting everything they deserve, I would suggest that you would prefer a 504 plan over just a health plan. But with an IEP, now that's a whole different law. Now you're under a whole different section of the law. Now you're under educational law. And this is about your child's rights in the school. And that's what an IEP is for. And they're only in the schools. There's no IEPs in the hospitals. There's no IEP. You understand what I'm saying? It's a school-based law. And the law basically came about because children were being discriminated against and being told that they were uneducable. We can't educate you. And so, we as a nation kind of stood up and said, now, wait a minute. I think there's things we can do for them. And so we actually passed this law, IDEA, which gives everybody free access to a free and appropriate public education if they have an educationally related disability. Now, realize that educationally related disabilities are actually, there's 13 categories in the federal law. And most people, when they talk about IEPs, they're only thinking about kids with learning disabilities. Or maybe they think of a kid with autism or perhaps an intellectual disability. There's another category you should be very, very aware of, and it's called other health impaired minor. There's also other health impaired major. And those categories are for children who have medically related disorders that adversely impact them in the school environment. Now, I want you to understand the terms, because in the schools, this is what they're going to say to you. Yeah, but how does it adversely impact them? They're getting straight A's. Well, the answer to that is, unfortunately, their fine and gross motor skills are delayed. Or, unfortunately, we have adaptive skills we're not developing. Those are also free game for areas of intervention for your child. And those are incorporated under the federal law. We're not just worried about whether they're getting A's and B's. We, as a nation, have said that our educational system is supposed to be turning people out that can be productive citizens in our society. So when you look at the whole child, you understand that there are other things that we are concerned about besides whether they're getting A's and B's. And by the way, C's get degrees, so, I never knew how to do that. I wanted to, but I never quite knew where to stop to get that C. So I got straight A's, but that was an accident. I was just, C's get degrees, but I just didn't know where to stop. All right, so now you see here that there are many possible people that could be on your school-based support team, and you might not have even heard of some of these, but the first one, of course, the most important, school psychologists. We're the ones that do the educational testing. We're the ones that run the protocols and determine where your child's areas of weakness are in the school. And you want the school psychologist to be your best friend, and they're usually quite compassionate and very willing to help and get on board with you. Then there's also the fine and gross motor skills that could be impacted by HPP. And with that, you might need a physical therapist to work on the gross motor skills. You might need an occupational therapist to help with the fine motor skills. You might need adaptive physical education. So there's people in the schools that are called APE, adaptive physical educators, and so they can adapt the physical education environment to your child's abilities physically. And so if they do have physical limitations, you're going to want adaptive PE on your team, right? The children have a right to have fun with everybody else, and there's ways for them to make that environment acceptable so they can, in fact, participate. And then also speech and language therapy. So we know that, the loss of teeth is sometimes a problem, and it can hinder the development of language and certain sounds and such. And so with that, you may need a speech and language therapist on your team to help your child develop those language skills, those sounds that they may have missed because their teeth were missing, and, we need them to make certain sounds. And so if they're not saying those sounds properly, then they're not hearing those sounds properly, and then that has an adverse impact on their reading and writing skills. Okay, so there are reasons why we would want speech and language on board. And then also the school nurse may be a very important part of your team. If you have any kind of medications that need to be administered, or if you have any issues that could come up, for example, being in the sun too long and things like that, then the school nurse is the one that would oversee that, and also would be the one to oversee that health plan that I referred to earlier. And then the intervention specialist, who is the one that gets in there with the academics, but they also do things like work on executive functioning skills, like planning and organizing and initiating the task and things like that. We'll talk more about those things in a minute. So you won't need all of those areas, okay? Or maybe you will. Maybe you need every one of those. But I wanted you to be aware of the different options that are available to you, and I failed to mention at this point, but please let me make something perfectly clear. This is a free and appropriate public education. You as a parent should not spend a dime on any of the services that I just mentioned that are school-based. So those are offered to you at no cost, and they're offered to the student during school hours. Now, there's a kind of shoot you in the foot a little bit if you've got a child that's behind academically and now you're pulling them out for 4 or 5 other services during the school day. You know what I mean? You have to weigh that a little bit and see what's the most important environment for them to be in, or the most important interventions for them to participate in. So when you think about, I've kind of given you a list of who you might want on your team, and you can ask for these people to be on your team. If you ask for the school to look at your child to see if they're eligible for an individualized education plan, they're going to send you a planning sheet, and it's going to show you on there everybody that's on that team and what they're going to do for the evaluation. And so with that being said, you want to know what's on that planning form, okay? You want to read over that and say, okay, what kind of tests are they going to do with my child? What are they planning on doing? And you may notice that one of these major people are missing on your team. Maybe you're very concerned about adaptive skills, but there's no assessment for adaptive skills on your planning form. Then you as a parent need to request that before the evaluation gets started, so that can be part of it. You have the right to request that and make that part of the evaluation with the appropriate professional assessing that area. Don't let the school get by with the general education teacher doing a little checklist on your child's adaptive skills. Those skills need to be assessed using a standardized assessment that's going to thoroughly assess all areas of adaptive skills and therefore flesh out the strengths and weaknesses. Okay, so you want formal assessment of these things. You don't want a teacher's opinion that may or may not like your child. They're just checking them boxes randomly. I go to these meetings where the teachers have to fill out forms for me, and I love the teachers, don't get me wrong, but they fill out these forms for me, and there's been like 3 occasions just this school year where a teacher thought they lost theirs, refilled it out. I actually had 2 copies, and I looked at these 2 and go, is this the same kid? Why 2 weeks ago? But now all of a sudden, it didn't make sense. So that's why I'm saying standardized assessments kind of get rid of that objectivity or subjectivity and make it a little more objective for you. All right, where am I at up there? I'm just carrying on over here with my slides. Meaningful participation in education. What does that mean? Your child has the right to meaningfully participate in education, and that includes physical education and recess and the lunchroom and everything else. And so if there are things that need to be adapted in order for your child to participate in these things, then that's what the school needs to do. That's their responsibility. It's their job to make sure that your child has all the same opportunities to meaningfully participate. So I've given you some suggestions there in terms of who you might want involved, who you might want to talk to, and what kinds of accommodations might be helpful, like even a safe place, you know? I mean, some kids get just super stressed out, and anxiety just gets off the charts, and they have got to get out of that room, and I think probably everybody in here can relate to that at some point or another in your life, you know? And so having a place where your child is permitted to go is a really, really helpful intervention. And that's one that I help get in place for a lot of kids. And it's just, you know, parents are like, oh my goodness, that helps so much, because it gives them just that moment break that they need. We usually set a timer, give them 5 minutes, something like that, get them right back into the classroom. But in the meantime, they've allowed their neurological system to rest for a minute. Many of our kiddos with HPP, rare disorders, their neurological systems, it's like they're wearing their nerves on the outside, right? And so it's like, and they need opportunities to calm down. Students with chronic health conditions can function to their maximum potential. So again, they need to have the resources and the tools in order to do well, like the Smart Pen perhaps, something like that. And we need to get those tools into their hand to make education a little easier for them, because while they're dealing with something a whole lot bigger, you know, in terms of chronic pain or a rare disorder and the limitations that puts on their lives. And what we would like to do is expand their opportunities, not further limit them. So the school environment should be an expansion, not a limitation. And if it's a limitation, then, you know, we need to get some perfectly good adults at the table so we can, you know, troubleshoot that and figure out what we can do better. Now, of course, the families have responsibilities, and obviously yours is to communicate with the teachers. It's to bring those doctor notes in. It's to try to set up doctor's appointments so they don't always conflict with the school time. It's to help the kids stay on track with their homework and things like that. So, you know, obviously there are family responsibilities that need to be taken care of in order to support your child at school. Now, let me help you understand the IEP process, because if you're sitting out there with a child with a rare disorder and they're not currently on an IEP, you may be wondering, well, how do we even start that? So that's what I'm going to tell you. You're going to call the building where your child would attend if they don't attend. They may be homeschooled or whatever. You call the building of attendance and you request that your child be tested for an individualized education plan based on their medical needs, that they have HPP, and here are their limitations. And when you provide that information to the school, then they have 30 days by federal law to get back with you and either say yes or no about that evaluation. And if they say no, that's never a no. And if they say yes, you say, thank you very much, send me the planning forms. If they say no, you have to take it to the next step and perhaps find a parent advocate in your area or a private school psychologist that works clinically rather than in the school, and sometimes you can get things done that way. So there are ways around it if the school says no. So, and if you want to contact me, my contact information is there. I do a lot of advocacy with parents, and I talk on the phone constantly, and that's free to you. And I'm sure that's something that most of you don't usually hear. So I am handing you a golden resource. It's my email address. And if you have any questions or need any assistance with getting your child the services that they need in the school, I would love to help you with that at no cost to you. I do that by contacting your school and just having a little discussion with them and helping them understand how important it is for them to move forward. And they most commonly agree that it is very important for us to move forward right away with that. So realize that I understand the lingo in the schools. I understand what they're saying when they use certain phrases, and you don't. So I'll know right away if they're thinking, yeah, this kid needs an IEP, or, oh, brother, these parents, I know. I can tell by the way they talk and the phrases that they use and things like that, so I can be helpful to you in understanding why they're saying what they're saying. So it's always good to provide a written description of your child's health and the concerns there and have that in your child's file. Okay, so you just write it up and say these are our current things, and you have a copy of it put in their school file so that their teachers who come and get their files, can read through that and they'll be aware of it as well. But again, I emphasize you should reach out to the school and set up a meeting with that teacher. I'm shocked sometimes to get to the end of the school year and talk to a teacher and they're like, oh, he's on an IEP? It's like, are you kidding me? You had legal responsibilities related to that IEP. How could you not know? That's no good. So hopefully you would recognize if they do have an IEP and it's not being serviced properly. But certainly let the school know if you do have an IEP and make sure that they're following the IEP. One parent asked me one time, they're like, well, how would I know if they're following the IEP? And I'm like, the progress reports. The what? So it's federally mandated that you get a progress report every 9 to 12 weeks regarding your child's IEP goals. And if you have a child on an IEP and you've never seen one of those reports, your school district is out of compliance with federal and state law. And I would definitely suggest to them that you'd like copies of those, because if you get 4 months, 4 progress reports in a row that all say on it not making adequate progress, it's your job to go, why not? What do we need to do different? What's happening here? Why are we not moving forward? And so it is within the parent's right to call an IEP team meeting anytime you want to. There's no limit on how many times you can call for an IEP team meeting during a school year. And I suggest that you be persistent. I suggest that if you did it 2 or 3 times in 1 year, you'd probably get everything you want after that. They'll just quit. They won't argue with you anymore. Oh, let's do that. They'll have us in 25 meetings. Yeah, sign on that. But squeaky wheel gets the grease. It's that. And of course, the student's responsibilities, if your child is having difficulties in the school, they should be informing adults. They should be informing the teacher. They should be informing you. And so we want to make sure that there's open lines of communication there for your child regarding those responsibilities. I'm getting behind on my slides, sorry. And so certainly you are an important part of the team. Now, the most recent IDEA that came down, and some people are calling it IDEIA now, in case you see that, it's the same thing. But they've recently changed a lot of the federal and state laws to increase the importance of parent participation in this process so that you have a very loud voice, and that power and authority has been given to you by the federal government and the state of Ohio or whatever state you're in. And so I strongly suggest that you hold them to that and, take advantage of whatever rights your child has within the school setting. And then, the school also has responsibilities. One of the things that the school is supposed to be finding kids with disabilities. It's called a child find law. You shouldn't have to go to them and say, my kid has a disability. They're supposed to come and find you. What that means is they're supposed to advertise, like on their web page and things like that. Hey, if your child has any of these issues, contact us, Or it's supposed to be in the local newspaper to inform you of your rights and So that's the child fine law. But if they overlook you in the child fine, or you miss the opportunity when they put that little ad in the paper one day, then you'll want to be the advocate and step up and go ahead and call the school and say, I need my child to be evaluated, or I need to meet the IEP team again. It really is a team effort, and that's why I put this up. I mean, I don't like the saying, it takes a village to raise a child, but it takes a village to raise a child sometimes, particularly when we have chronic illnesses and things, and we have huge teams that need to come together to meet the needs. And so together everyone achieves more. We're a team. And so I say that knowing that this can be very overwhelming, that this was a very quick kind of presentation in terms of what all I know and what all you might need to know. I tried to give you the real basics, but if there's anything that you heard and you're like, oh, what was that about? Or tell me more about that, I'm certainly available for that. I'd like to take a minute to open up for some questions if anybody has any, and if not, then I have a few more comments that I can make. Does anyone have any questions about IEPs, 504s? Do any of you have, It's okay. So because of discrimination laws, it should never hinder anything in terms of getting into college. But no, it does not follow your, now IEP is for school-aged kids, but actually starting preschool all the way through the 12th grade. And an IEP does not go with you to college. What happens is in your child's senior year, your school counselor converts your IEP to a 504 plan, and that goes with you. Okay, because now then you'll transition from the educational laws to your civil rights. Okay, so 504 plans are used in the schools. It provides accommodations at the university level for kids with disabilities. The reason why it transfers to a 504 plan, there's no intervention specialists at college. Okay, and that's really the difference between the IEP and the 504. So given there's no intervention specialists, the IEP ends, and then it transitions to a 504 if they do their job right. You might have to request that, okay? Or tell them in their senior year that you want to transition to a 504. It makes it a lot easier when you go to the Office of Disabilities at the university level to get those accommodations if you have a formal 504 plan. So, any other questions about anything I've talked about? Okay, what was the original time I was supposed to be done? I don't have my schedule up here. 1 o'clock was my closing time?
For the first topic, yeah.
Yeah, and that included the Q&A?
Yes.
Oh, good, we're perfect. All right. Thank you so much for letting me ramble on. I hope you found something useful. Again, reach out to me if you have any further questions, and we'll move on to our next topic here in a minute.